The invasion fleet materialized above Earth like spilled ink across starlight. 47 vessels of the Umbral Dominion hung in perfect formation, their obsidian hulls drinking light from the void. Commander Vexthara stood on the bridge above. The flagship Nightmare's edge, her form a shifting mass of liquid shadow, punctuated by burning crimson eyes. Around her, lesser Umbral officers whispered in the ancient tongue of fears. "Report, Scout Prime Dreadmore," she commanded, her voice. Like wind through cemetery gates, the reconnaissance officer materialized from the darkness, his essence rippling with excitement. "Commander, preliminary scans confirm this world follows the standard fear hierarchy patterns. The bipedal species, they call themselves humans, exhibit textbook psychological vulnerabilities. They fear darkness, isolation, the unknown lurking in corners of their perception." Vexthara's mouth, a tear in reality itself, curved upward. "Excellent. How long since their last major planetary trauma? Multiple ongoing conflicts, economic instability, environmental collapse, perfect conditions. For fear cultivation, their terror reservoirs should be at maximum capacity." Sub-Commander Gloomstrike, a towering figure whose presence made reality grow cold, stepped forward. "Commander, shall we begin Phase 1 infiltration? My shadow wraiths are eager to taste their nightmares." "Proceed, but remember protocol," Vexthara cautioned. "We study their fears first. Every species keeps their deepest terrors hidden in shadow spaces, basements, attics, forgotten corners. Map their psychological weak points before we manifest their worst nightmares into reality." The bridge thrummed with malevolent energy as the first wave of scouts dissolved into wisps of living darkness, streaming toward Earth's night side. Vexthara gazed at the blue-green world below, already imagining the delicious terror that would soon rise from its surface like steam from a cauldron. "Another world falls to shadow," she murmured, consulting her tactical display. "Population, 7 billion. Estimated harvest time, 72 hours. Resistance probability, negligible." The Umbral Dominion had conquered over 3,000 worlds. Using the same proven strategy, they had broken civilizations that spanned galaxies, reduced warrior species to quivering masses, and turned entire planets into fear farms. This small blue world would be no different. Far below, in a suburban basement in Ohio, 16-year-old Marcus was settling in for another night of streaming horror games to his modest audience of 12 followers. He adjusted his headset and cracked his knuckles. "All right, chat. Tonight we're hitting the new Phasmophobia update. I heard they added some absolutely terrifying new ghost types." He grinned at his webcam. "Let's see if we can't get me to scream like a little girl again." The first Umbral scout slipped through the basement window, invisible and incorporeal, ready to catalog this human's deepest fears. It settled into the corner, preparing to observe and document. Marcus clicked Start Game and dove headfirst into a haunted asylum simulation, laughing with genuine delight as a digital specter charged at his screen. The scout's essence recoiled in confusion. This human was ... enjoying this. Asterisk across the globe, similar scenes of bewilderment unfolded as Umbral scouts infiltrated humanity's shadow spaces, only to discover horrors beyond their comprehension. In Tokyo, Scout Wraith malcontent descended into a basement arcade where dozens of humans were paying money to experience something called VR horror experiences. She watched in stunned silence as a businessman removed a headset, wiping sweat from his brow with the biggest grin she'd ever seen on a sentient being's face. "That zombie apocalypse scenario was incredible," he exclaimed to his friend. "When that crawler jumped out of the vent, I nearly had a heart attack. 5 stars, would definitely die horribly again." Malcontent's shadows writhed in confusion. According to every psychological profile in their databases, Beings should flee from simulated death, not rated on entertainment value. Meanwhile, in London, Sorrowbringer had infiltrated what appeared to be a torture chamber, walls painted black, filled with grotesque imagery and implements of terror. But instead of cowering victims, he found a group of teenagers celebrating something called a horror movie marathon. "Oh my God, Emma, cover your eyes," squealed a human female as a fictional monster dismembered someone on screen. "This is the best part." Emma peeked through her fingers, gasping with delight rather than terror. "I can't look." "But I can't look away either. Put on the next one." The Umbral Scout attempted to enhance their fear by manifesting a small tendril of genuine nightmare energy. The teenagers noticed immediately. "Dude, did you see that shadow move?" One asked excitedly. "This place is totally haunted. This is the best sleepover ever." 3 time zones away in New York, Terror Spawn was having an existential crisis in a converted warehouse where humans had voluntarily paid admission to something called an escape room. They were locked in a dark space with what appeared to be an actual serial killer scenario, complete with fake corpses and psychological terror elements that would have impressed the Umbral High Command. The humans were solving puzzles. Okay, so if the killer's pattern follows the calendar dates, and we cross-reference with the victim profiles. A woman in business attire was calmly analyzing murder clues while her companions searched for hidden keys. When a mechanical skeleton dropped from the ceiling, they cheered. 30 minutes left. Announced an employee through speakers. "The Midnight Butcher is getting closer." "We got this," shouted back the humans, high-fiving each other. Terror Spawn retreated to report his findings, thoroughly shaken. He materialized on the command ship, his form more translucent than usual. "Commander," he whispered to Vexthara, "I request immediate extraction from the field." "Explain." Her voice carried the chill of absolute zero. They're doing it to themselves. Willingly. They've created artificial versions of everything we do, but somehow made it fun. The word came out like a curse in the ancient language. Across the fleet, similar reports flooded in. Humans were consuming horror media like nutritional supplements. They had entire festivals dedicated to celebrating fear. Children were dressing up as the very monsters that should have sent them screaming into therapy. Vexthara's crimson eyes narrowed as she processed the intelligence reports. In 3 millennia of conquest, she had never encountered anything like this. Asterisk, perhaps? Vexthara mused. We are misunderstanding their cultural context. Deploy Phase 2. Infiltrate their commercial fear distribution centers. Sub-Commander Gloomstrike manifested beside her, his presence causing the temperature to drop 10 degrees. Shall we begin psychological warfare operations? Not yet. We need to understand how they've perverted the sacred art of fear into ... entertainment. The word dripped with disgust. The second wave of scouts descended upon Earth's retail establishments dedicated to horror merchandise. What they discovered defied every law of psychological conquest they had studied. In a Spirit Halloween store in Dallas, Nightmare Weaver found herself surrounded by polyester versions of her own species. Plastic masks bore crude approximations of umbral features, complete with glowing red eyes and fangs. A sign read, "Shadow Demon costume only $39.99. Scare your friends." A human child, no more than 8 years old, held up a miniature version of an umbral war mask. "Mom, can I be this for Halloween?" "It's so cool." The mother examined the price tag. "It's a bit expensive, sweetie. How about the vampire costume?" "But Mom, this one has real shadow effects." The child demonstrated the costume's LED lighting system, which produced a laughably inaccurate but enthusiasm-filled approximation of umbral shadow manipulation. Nightmare Weaver felt something she'd never experienced in her 1,000-year existence. Professional insult. These humans had turned her entire species into a discount costume category. Across town, Despairmonger was having an equally disturbing experience in a Barnes & Noble, where humans were purchasing books with titles like How to Survive a Horror, Movie and the Psychology of Fear, Understanding What Makes Us Scream. One human was casually reading a manual on ghost hunting techniques while sipping coffee. "Excuse me," a teenage human approached him, somehow sensing his presence despite his incorporeal state. "Are you like a real ghost? Because that would be so sick for my YouTube channel. I'm doing a series on authentic paranormal encounters." Despairmonger materialized slightly, hoping to at least startle the child. Instead, the teenager's eyes lit up with excitement. "Oh wow, you're like super tall. And those red eyes are amazing. Do you mind if I get a selfie? My followers would absolutely lose their minds." Before Despairmonger could process what was happening, the human had positioned himself next to an ancient being of pure terror and was making peace signs with his fingers while a small device captured their image. "This is going to get so many likes," the teenager muttered, already typing on his communication device. Hashtag authentic ghost encounter. Hashtag not clickbait. Hashtag spooky content. The breaking point came when Horrorbane, eldest of the Scout Division, infiltrated a comic convention in San Diego. She expected to find humans cowering from depictions of cosmic horror and eldritch nightmares. Instead, she discovered thousands of humans voluntarily dressed as monsters. Demons and creatures that would have sent entire civilizations into madness. A middle-aged woman approached her, wearing an elaborate costume that bore an uncanny resemblance to an umbral battle wraith. "Oh my gosh, your cosplay is incredible. Those practical effects are amazing. How did you get the shadow tendrils to move like that? Is it wireless puppetry?" Horrorbane tried to manifest her true form, allowing her nightmare essence to flow freely. The woman gasped in delight. "Are you kidding me? That's next-level special effects. Are you a professional costume designer?" "I've been working on my own shadow creature build for months." Around them, humans were taking pictures, asking for tutorials, and exchanging contact information about costume construction techniques. Horrorbane found herself accidentally signing autographs with her claws. When she finally escaped back to the command ship, she was carrying a business card from someone who wanted to hire for birthday party appearances. Asterisk, "This ends now?" Vexthara declared, her form crackling with accumulated rage and confusion. "Assemble the Terror Council. We proceed to Phase 3 immediately." The Terror Council materialized in the ship's central chamber 7 ancient beings whose combined nightmares had toppled stellar empires. Their leader, Archdread Voidmaw, spoke in a voice like collapsing stars. "Commander Vexthara, explain this unprecedented situation. The humans have somehow immunized themselves against fear through repeated exposure," she reported, her professional composure cracking. "They've turned terror into a recreational activity. Our standard psychological warfare protocols are ineffective." Council Wraith Abyssagaze leaned forward, his presence making reality weep. "Then we escalate. Summon their ultimate fear, the one thing they've kept buried deepest in their collective unconscious. Every species has one primal terror that breaks them completely." Vexthara nodded grimly. Initiating Deep Terror Protocol. Scanning for humanity's greatest hidden fear. The Umbral Fleet's most powerful psychic resonators probed Earth's collective unconscious, diving past individual phobias into the species. Core terror. Energy readings spiked as they touched something vast and institutional. "Contact," whispered Nightmare Weaver. "I'm reading massive fear signatures. Something about numbers? Documentation? Annual submissions?" The psychic probe locked onto the terror signal and began manifesting it in physical reality. Dark clouds gathered over major population centers as the manifestation took shape, an entity so terrifying, so fundamentally opposed to human happiness, that merely thinking about it caused widespread anxiety. The IRS Audit Division during tax season materialized over downtown Denver. Fluorescent lighting filled the sky. The air itself smelled of office coffee and bureaucratic despair. Forms began raining from the clouds. 1040s, Schedule CS. Receipts that humans definitely should have kept, but absolutely didn't. Vexthara watched in triumph as humans emerged from their buildings to stare at the manifestation of their deepest institutional dread. This was it, the moment of breaking, when terror finally overwhelmed their bizarre psychological defenses. Instead, she witnessed something that would haunt her for eternity. The human sighed and began organizing receipts. "Well, this sucks," muttered a woman pulling a shoebox from her car. "But at least it's early this year. Usually, I don't start panicking until April." A man nearby was already setting up a folding table on the sidewalk. "Anyone got a calculator? And maybe some coffee? This is going to take a while." Within hours, impromptu tax preparation stations had appeared throughout the city. Humans were sharing extension forms, trading contact information for accountants, and forming support groups. Someone had set up a coffee cart with a sign reading, "IRS Manifestation Special, $2 caffeine for existential dread." But the most devastating blow to the Umbral Dominion's collective psyche came when a local news crew arrived. "This is Channel 7 News, with breaking coverage of what appears to be a supernatural manifestation of tax season," announced the reporter, speaking into her microphone with the weary professionalism of someone who'd covered everything from alien invasions to reality TV star political campaigns. Local CPA Margaret Chun joins us now with tips for dealing with this otherworldly audit scenario. Margaret, what's your advice for viewers facing an interdimensional tax emergency? The camera panned to a small woman in glasses who looked completely unfazed by the cosmic horror surrounding her. "Well, Diane, the most important thing is to stay organized. Even if your forms are being manifested by shadow demons from another dimension, the filing requirements remain the same." Vexthara felt something crack inside her essence, not physical damage, but a fundamental break in her understanding of how reality worked. Asterisk, enough. Archdread Voidmaw's roar shattered 3 moons in a nearby solar system. "If humanity refuses to fear properly, then I will face their leader myself. Prepare for my descent." The Umbral Emperor manifested his full presence, a being of such concentrated terror that his emergence usually caused entire planets to surrender immediately. He had never personally intervened in a conquest before. His mere existence was typically sufficient to break any species' will to resist. He descended toward Earth at 3:17 a.m., targeting what their scans indicated was a human leadership dwelling. His form blotted out the stars as he approached a modest suburban home with a minivan in the driveway and children's toys scattered across the lawn. The Emperor materialized in the living room, his presence filling the space with primordial dread that should have driven any sentient being to madness. The temperature dropped 40 degrees. Shadows writhed independently of their sources. The very air whispered with the accumulated fears of 1,000 conquered worlds. A hallway light clicked on. "Look, buddy," came a tired voice from the stairway. A human female appeared, wearing what seemed to be soft sleeping garments covered in cartoon animals. She carried a small human larva that was making distressing noise. "I don't know what kind of home invasion situation this is, but I've got a teething baby, a mortgage payment due tomorrow, and my teenager just texted me that." She crashed the car into Mrs. Henderson's mailbox again. She bounced the crying infant while staring directly at an entity that had made entire civilizations extinct. "So you're going to have to get in line behind my actual problems, or at least keep it down, because if you wake up my 4-year-old after I just got him back to sleep, I will end you myself." The Umbral Emperor, being of pure cosmic horror, an accumulated nightmare essence, found himself at a complete loss for words. The human continued, apparently interpreting his stunned silence as cooperation. "Thank you. Now, if you're here to conquer the planet or whatever, the government buildings are downtown. Try City Hall. They're usually the ones who deal with this kind of thing. But seriously, keep the volume down." She disappeared back upstairs, still bouncing the infant and muttering something about, "Why do the weird ones always show up during teething weeks?" The Emperor stood alone in the living room, surrounded by evidence of human existence. Family. Photos, a half-finished jigsaw puzzle, children's artwork held to the refrigerator with magnetic clips. On the coffee table lay several books. Parenting Through the Terrible Twos, Managing Household Finances, and True Crime Podcasts. Why We Love Serial Killer Stories. He picked up the last book with a trembling tentacle of shadow and began to read. 20 minutes later, he was back on the command ship, his ancient essence pale with existential terror. "Commander Vexthara," he whispered, "prepare for immediate retreat." "My lord? But the conquest. They've weaponized their own fear response," he explained, his voice hollow with defeat. "They deliberately seek out horror for entertainment. They've industrialized terror production. They consume stories about their own species committing atrocities while performing domestic chores." He pulled up the intelligence reports flooding in from around the globe. "Look at this. They have entire networks dedicated to something called True Crime Podcasts, where they voluntarily listen to detailed accounts of murders while cooking dinner. They have ghost hunting shows where they actively seek out the supernatural. They've turned our entire profession into their entertainment industry." Vexthara stared at the data in growing horror. "What are your orders, my lord?" "Update the Universal Conquest Manual immediately," the Emperor commanded. "New entry. Human species classification. Unassailable. Note: species that has successfully weaponized their own fear response for recreational purposes. Demonstrates complete psychological immunity to traditional terror-based conquest strategies. Avoid at all costs."